I work in a small cafe on the corner of the old quarter. The place isn't big, but it's cozy. Wooden tables, an old coffee machine, the smell of fresh bread in the mornings. Everyone knows me here. The regular customers, the neighborhood families, even the delivery guys sometimes stop by for an espresso before work. I love this job. Here you can hide from the whole city under the hiss of coffee steam and the quiet murmur of patrons. My life is usually just as predictable. Work, home, a few friends, a few books, sometimes Netflix before bed. I'm 28 and I've never really sought out adventures. But sometimes life finds them on its own, quietly, without warning. That day was an ordinary morning. Sunbeams filtered through the dusty windows, customers ordered coffee and croissants. I was clearing tables, wiping dishes, checking for crumbs on the floor. And then, while clearing the table by the window where the last customer was still sitting, I noticed a black leather wallet under the chair. My first thought was that it was lost. I picked it up and quickly glanced inside. There was cash, a decent amount, a few bank cards, and a business card with no name, just a strange symbol like a crest. The money was neatly folded, not crumpled. This wasn't an ordinary wallet. It looked too expensive. I didn't know what to do. Normally, I'd turn it in to the police, but something inside made me try to return it personally. Maybe it was my habit of helping people. Maybe curiosity, or a naive belief that if you do the right thing, the world will be grateful. I called the number on the business card. The man who opened the door looked like he was doing it reluctantly. His face was calm, but his eyes were cold. He didn't smile. He didn't say thank you. He just looked, took the wallet, and closed the door. I stood on the sidewalk, thinking it was all over. Inside, there was anxiety, but I tried to ignore it. People are different, I told myself. Just an ordinary person who values order. But that night was different. When I got home, there were grocery bags on the doorstep of my apartment. Not mine. I hadn't ordered anything. All the products were neatly arranged in the bags. On one of the bags was a small note. So you don't have to go to the store. I looked around. Empty hallway, quiet streets. No one. My heart started beating faster. I thought, maybe someone is just thanking me. But inside, something clicked like an alarm signal. The next morning, I noticed a black car outside the house. No license plates. It stood motionless, as if waiting. At first, it seemed like the driver was just sleeping, but when I left work in the evening, the car was there again, unmoving, as if watching. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe a neighbor's car, I thought. But then I started noticing details. Only I saw the car, it was always in the same spot, and sometimes silhouettes flickered behind the glass in the dark. I talked about it with a friend. What if someone is just thanking me? She tried to calm me. Well, maybe someone just wants to help. You did return the wallet. But I felt differently. This wasn't gratitude. It was a feeling of control. I felt that my decision to return the wallet had started something I hadn't asked for, like my act was a ticket to a game whose rules I didn't know yet. The days went by and everything got stranger. Envelopes appeared, money, small gifts. Every time I tried to get rid of them, they came back. Sometimes the products were just necessities, sometimes strange things, specific brands I'd never bought, perfectly suited for me. My job became my sanctuary, but even there I felt a strange tension. Every time I saw a man in black clothes or the black car outside the house, my heart raced. I started suspecting this wasn't gratitude. One evening, coming home, I saw a person at the door I'd never noticed before. He just stood there, silent, unmoving. In his hands, the same wallet I'd returned. He placed it on the doorstep and left. On the wallet was a new business card with the same emblem. I sat on the floor in the hallway, holding the wallet, trying to understand what was happening. Everything seemed strange, frightening, and at the same time, like I'd been drawn into a world where doing the right thing has its price. And now I'm writing this here on Reddit. I need someone to hear. Sometimes good deeds lead to situations you can't hide from. And that feeling, heavy, cold, like a steel hand on your shoulder. I thought it was just gratitude. But now I'm not sure where the line is between good and control. and sometimes it feels like I'm no longer free to make ordinary decisions. From that evening when I returned the wallet, my life changed. I'd come home after work and each time catch myself thinking, something's wrong. Grocery bags, envelopes, the black car outside the house, all of it became my new, strange ritual. The first bag appeared right on the doorstep of my apartment. I remember being surprised. The products were neatly packed, as if someone knew in advance what I needed. Bread, milk, fruits, all fresh, like they'd just been bought from the corner store. On one of the bags was a small note, "So you don't have to go to the store." I didn't immediately realize it wasn't just a gesture of kindness. Inside me, something tugged, a feeling of anxiety that couldn't be ignored. Why no signature? Why such perfectly selected products? I left the note on the table, trying not to think about who could have done it. The next day, I decided to see what would happen next. When I came home after a late shift, a black car was waiting on the street. It stood in the same place, motionless like a statue. I froze, gauging the distance. No one was visible, but my heart pounded wildly. At work, I tried to distract myself. Customers, orders, the noise of the coffee machine, all of it helped not to think about the strange events. But the thoughts came back on their own. Every movement on the stairs, every door opening, every call, everything seemed part of some scheme I didn't understand. A few days later, an envelope appeared. It was lying on my table when I got home. Inside was a small sum of money, enough to pay the rent for a month. On the envelope was one phrase: "We take care of those who do the right thing." I sat on the floor, holding the envelope. Fear and confusion mixed into a strange cocktail. Who are these people? Why do they know where I live? Why me? I tried to talk about it with a friend. She listened silently, then said, "Maybe someone just wants to thank you. You did return the wallet." I didn't believe her. Inside me, the feeling grew that this wasn't just gratitude. It was control. They knew what I'd done, and now they were watching. A week after returning the wallet, bags started appearing almost every day. Sometimes with food, sometimes with things I really needed, but always with small notes. "To make it easier for you, we care. You did the right thing." Every time I tried to get rid of them or return them, the bags vanished and reappeared. I didn't call anyone, didn't go to the police. I was afraid any attempt to interfere would be seen as disobedience. The black car kept standing outside the house. Sometimes the driver just sat inside. Sometimes he got out and left without noticing me. I started feeling like every movement of mine was being recorded. Even when I went to the store or café, it felt like eyes were on me. One evening, coming home after a late shift, I saw a man in a black suit waiting on the bench by the entrance. He didn't approach, didn't say a word, just sat and watched. I quickened my pace, but he raised his hand in a light greeting gesture, nothing more. My heart pounded like it would jump out of my chest. The next day, I found an envelope under the door. Inside, photos of me, taken at the cafe and on my way home. I sat on the floor, holding the photos, and couldn't breathe. I realized this wasn't a game anymore. It was surveillance, and I was at its center. I tried to figure out what to do. Ignore it, pretend not to notice. But every day the bags, envelopes, car, person on the bench all came back. I started recording all the events, times, details, everything that happened. It was like a surveillance diary. A few days later, a new bag arrived. Inside was a book I'd long wanted to read and a small note: "For your understanding." I opened the book and found a business card with the emblem from the wallet between the pages. On the card were only words: "We value right actions, but rightness requires responsibility." I trembled, holding the card. Everything seemed like care and threat at the same time. My apartment was no longer just a place I lived. It became a place where I was watched. I started noticing strange details in everyday life. New cars at neighbors, unfamiliar faces on the streets, strange calls without numbers. I understood it was all part of the pressure. And the more I tried to stay normal, the more I felt the control. Every night I checked windows, doors, hallway cameras. I installed locks, tried not to show fear at work. But the fear grew from inside. And every day the bags, envelopes, and cars confirmed that my good deed had started something I couldn't control. I started to understand. This wasn't just gratitude. It was a debt. A debt I hadn't asked for, but which already hung over my head. And the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it manifested. One evening, when I got home, the bags and envelopes were already waiting at the door. This time, there was one phrase on a large sheet of paper. "You can always count on us." Those words sounded like a threat, though formally there was nothing scary. I realized the boundary between care and control had vanished. And now I was drawn into a world where the right action, returning the wallet, meant being under surveillance, and every step of mine was recorded. I sat on the floor, holding the envelope and the sheet of paper, and for the first time realized I'm no longer an ordinary waitress. I'm part of something I didn't ask for. And every day, every package, every car confirmed, the world I knew is gone. Since then, my life has become a balance on the edge of fear and curiosity. I couldn't leave, couldn't refuse. And every day I asked myself one question: is this good, or the start of a debt dependency? From the moment bags, envelopes, and the black car became part of my life, I tried to maintain my usual routine. At work, I pretended nothing was happening. I smiled at customers, poured coffee, joked with colleagues, but inside, everything burned with anxiety. Every day, I checked the doorstep, windows, stairs, but the bags still appeared. One morning, I opened the door, and there was an envelope with money on the threshold. This time, the amount was more than needed for rent. On the envelope was a short phrase: "So you don't have to think about problems." I put the money in my wallet, feeling relief and fear at the same time. It was help I hadn't asked for, but help always has a price. The next week, someone called from an unknown number. The voice was quiet, calm, but such that every word sounded like an order. "We see how you're coping. If you want, we can make your life even easier." I froze, not knowing what to say. I tried to joke it off, pretend it was spam, but the voice said things only I knew. Small details from my life that no one but me could know. And then I met him face to face for the first time. The man I'd seen in the black car approached me as I was coming home from work. His suit was perfectly pressed, hands folded in front of him. He didn't smile, but his eyes had such coldness that I immediately felt like I was on trial. "We value your actions," he said, "but the value of an action is measured by readiness for responsibility." I didn't understand right away what he meant, but a few days later, it became obvious. The first tasks appeared, nothing illegal, at least formally, but everything they asked had a double meaning. I had to deliver packages to specific people, pick up documents, pass them on. It all looked like casual help to neighbors, but inwardly I understood. These were checks, tests, observations. Each task ended with the same phrase: "We're always nearby if you act right." I couldn't refuse. Every time I tried to refuse, the next day the bags became even more specific, more necessary. Small problems I couldn't solve myself, suddenly resolved without my involvement. Broken washing machine, the repair was already done. Electricity bill payment cleared on its own. Everything happened as if someone was managing my life. And each time it was accompanied by a bag or envelope. And each time I felt that this gift was another step into a debt dependency I hadn't asked for. A month after returning the wallet, I met the boss in person for the first time. He came to the café where I worked, sat at a table in the corner watching me. I didn't know what to do. My ordinary life, work, coffee, chats with customers, suddenly turned into an arena of observation. "You're doing well," he said as I approached to clear the tables. "You understand that good deeds are just the beginning. They create debt." I didn't know how to react. He wasn't threatening, but every phrase sounded like an order. Good had become a trap. I started noticing that I stopped making decisions for myself. Every step, every little thing, everything was checked, evaluated. A week later, he sent me an envelope with a letter. "We know you're trying to be independent, but independence is an illusion if actions have consequences." I trembled, holding the letter. Everything was so cold, formal, yet intimate. Every word made my heart beat faster. And with each new package, each letter, each call, I understood. This isn't care anymore. It's control. And then the scariest part began: moral pressure. I had to perform tasks that at first seemed simple. Pass a package, pick up paper, meet a person. But with each task, I felt like I was becoming part of someone else's game, and my ordinary life was disappearing. Every morning, I checked the threshold. Every evening, the street. Sometimes I saw people in black clothes, sometimes the car standing motionless, as if watching me. I stopped going out alone in the evenings. My job became my refuge, but even there I felt the boss's gaze. One evening, when I tried to go for a walk, the car was parked, blocking the way. Inside, the familiar silhouette. I felt that any attempts to avoid this control were pointless. A few days later, an envelope with a letter arrived. "You're handling the debt well, but remember, debt is not only responsibility but also choice." I understood I had no choice. I couldn't refuse the help because without it, life turned into chaos. And every time I tried to resist, the bags, letters, help returned even more insistently. The psychological pressure became unbearable. I started seeing acquaintances on the street and thinking they were connected to this. My ordinary life dissolved. Even friends started noticing I'd changed. I became quiet, wary, tired. And at that moment, I realized for the first time, good has a price. And that price is dependency. I didn't ask for help. I didn't want this power over my life, but I was already drawn into it. The boss sent another package. Inside, a diary. On the first page was an entry: "Every action has consequences. Every decision creates debt." I opened the diary and understood. This was a guide on how to live in a world where good and debt are one and the same. And now I was part of that world, on the edge between gratitude and fear. My life turned into a series of checks, bags, envelopes, calls, and observations. Each new event was a test, a trial of how ready I was to accept the dependency no one had asked about. And every day I ask myself one question: is this help or a trap? I woke up with the feeling that someone was watching me. A light noise outside the window, dark silhouettes of passers-by. Everything seemed significant. Every day since I returned the wallet has been a test of endurance, caution, of how ready I am to live in a world where good always has a price. Bags, envelopes, and the car outside the house became a constant part of my life. I tried to ignore them, tried to live a normal life, but fear seeped into every movement. Even morning coffee at the café didn't give a sense of safety. I felt the boss's gaze in every familiar face, in every unfamiliar passerby. A few weeks later, a new package arrived. This time, inside was a key, not to the apartment, but to something else. I didn't know what to do. On the paper was a short phrase: "For your safety and comfort." I sat on the floor, holding the key, and realized my life no longer belonged to me. Every step I took, every decision, every thought, everything was controlled, checked, observed. I tried to resist, ignore the bags, not answer calls, not do tasks, but everything returned even more intrusively. Products, help with bill payments, small things that eased life but simultaneously bound me to them. Each new intervention was like a check. I understood that any no was seen as disobedience, and the more I tried to maintain independence, the stronger I felt the pressure. One day, coming home late at night, the car was parked blocking the road. Inside, the boss's silhouette. He got out, slowly approached, and his eyes met mine. "Do you think you can just leave?" he asked. His voice was quiet even, but it held a cold power. I didn't know what to say. Any word seemed wrong. I wanted to run, hide, just disappear. But I understood it was impossible. Every step of mine was recorded, checked, evaluated. That evening, I understood the true price of the right action for the first time. The good I did became a trap. And that trap was exquisitely subtle. Help, care, attention, all turned into dependency. The following days were a nightmare. Every movement was controlled. Bags, envelopes, small services, all simultaneously eased life and bound me. I tried to hide at work, but even there I felt watched. Every call, every colleague's glance, every customer, it seemed someone was always nearby, observing my reactions. I started recording everything. Every bag, every envelope, every call, every moment I felt the boss's presence. It was my way to keep at least some control, some ability to see the whole picture. A few weeks later, another package arrived. This time, inside was a note with one phrase. "You can always count on us." Those words sounded simpler than any threat, but were heavier than anything. I understood what they meant. You can live, but only within our will. And that feeling, the realization that my life was no longer mine, became unbearable. I tried to escape, decided not to go home one evening, went down another street, tried to hide. But a few minutes later, I saw the familiar car in the distance. It stood motionless, as if waiting for me, and I understood, in this game, there's no chance. A few days later, an envelope with a letter arrived. "You tried to leave. We saw, but we care. Now you understand the price of the right action." My heart trembled. I sat on the floor, holding the letter, and felt full fear for the first time. It wasn't a threat. It was reality, one I'd entered voluntarily, but which turned out to be a trap. I tried to talk to someone, friends, colleagues, but I couldn't tell them the truth. Any details would sound unbelievable, and every time I tried to tell even part of it, I felt like someone was listening. My life became a series of checks, bags, envelopes, help, and control. All of it simultaneously eased life and deprived me of freedom. I could no longer make decisions for myself. Every step, every little thing, every glance, everything was recorded, evaluated, controlled. And then I realized for the first time, good has a price. And that price is dependency I didn't ask for. Every bag, envelope, every service was a debt I didn't want but which already hung over my head. One evening, the last package arrived. Inside, a diary, keys, an envelope with money, and a short note. "You understand the rules. Good is debt. You can always count on us." I sat on the floor, holding everything in my hands, and understood. My life is no longer mine. I can't go back to the past, can't forget that it all started with one seemingly right action, returning the wallet. I'm writing this here on Reddit because I need someone to hear. Sometimes right actions turn into traps, and the price of that trap is freedom, independence, ordinary life. Sometimes I wake up at night and think, was this good? Or was it just a debt I never asked for? And as long as I live, as long as I continue to exist, I know one thing. The price of the right action can be higher than you're willing to pay. And sometimes, the scariest thing is realizing that you've already paid it in full, without even understanding when it happened.